Chapter 17. Teo Virata. Teo was currently under attack. Unfortunately, he was cornered. This might be a problem for most people, but for a shield mage, even a mediocre acolyte like Teo Virata, it made things a bit easier. With his back to the 90-degree intersection of two walls of brick and mortar, he had been able to activate both his eastern and western vertices, creating two large rectangles of solid light. Since his eastern vertex had always been stronger, he created a small circle of light beneath his right ear to give him balance. Plus, he could lean back, using the two walls to brace the two shields, which he enhanced with his heart, spirit, and mind vertices, thus increasing their strength. There was no way the three attacking Gruul warriors would be able to get him, so he felt safe enough, for now. But I'm stuck. This is not helping me find Rat. Before entering Gruul territory, Teo had traveled first to the Celestia Conclave, only getting lost twice along the way, consulting briefly with Emara Tandris and Rat's godfather Boruvo. He'd been told not to worry, for Rat often disappeared for weeks at a time, but Teo had worried, and thus his journey had continued. He had informed the trio now attacking him, two humans and a goblin, wearing fur tunics and a considerable quantity of decorative bones, that he sought the daughter of two of its finest warriors, Ari and Gan Shokta. But the three weren't impressed by Teo's name-dropping. It seemed they were from a different clan than the Shoktas, and since the war that had united the Gruul clans was now over, they weren't in the mood to suffer another clan's friend. Teo's one hope struck him as wishful thinking. There had been a young Biashino nearby who had not joined in on the assault. When he'd heard who Teo was looking for, he had turned to head down a tunnel. Rather lazily, Teo thought, as the boy maintained his shields against the regular pounding of three Gruul hammers. He was crossing his vertices that the Viashino might be bringing help. He'd never been certain if the Viashino was indeed his savior, but sure enough, Ari Shokta and her clan leader, the Cyclops Bor Borigmos, both arrived on the scene armed and ready for battle. But there was no fight. Bor Borigmos roared something unintelligible, to Teo at least, and Teo's three assailants made a few feeble threats before taking off at a run. Ari Shokta approached, and Teo instantly dropped his shields. She grabbed him up into a fierce bear hug that put his ribs at greater risk than they had been during the attack. "Teo, my boy," she said. "It's good to see you." Despite the pain to his nearly caved-in sides, this warm greeting was a welcome change. The first couple of times Teo had encountered Ari, she had been decidedly suspicious of her daughter's new friend. But Teo had somehow managed to be instrumental in saving the entire Shokta family, not to mention Bor Borigmos and the other 9 guild leaders from the god Eternal Kefnet. And that act had impressed Ari enough to change her opinion. She liked that Teo could see her daughter, and seemed to feel he was worthy of Araethia's company. Looking around, Ari said, "Where is our Araethia?" Teo's shoulders sank. "I was hoping you knew. She left during the night, and I haven't been able to find her." "I haven't seen her since the end of the battle," Ari said, then turned to shoot a questioning look at the Cyclops, who shrugged and muttered something Teo couldn't make out, but was clearly meant to impart, "Don't ask me." Ari turned back to Teo and looked at him sympathetically. "Don't worry, Teo. This is not unusual. Sometimes Rat doesn't come around for weeks at a time." That's exactly what Boruvo said. Hearing the centaur's name, Borigmos growled low, and Ari scowled darkly, reminding Teo he shouldn't be mentioning Rat's godfather, the Gruul defector, in these domains. Sorry, Teo said, but I am worried. I've been worried about her ever since we learned Hikara can no longer see her. That was a blow indeed. But trust me, my daughter is extremely resilient. It's a blow she will recover from. Still. Yes? I'm glad you seek her, Teo Verada. It is good. Teo nodded, not feeling worthy of her confidence. He knew where he needed to seek Rat next, and he dreaded it. Chapter 18. Chandra Nalaar. One stone on top of another, on top of another, on top of another, on top of the armor of her gids. By the time they arrived, it was already night on Theros, and they built the cairn together. Each of them had scoured the landscape under the light of a beautiful full moon to find just the right stone for the purpose, the right stone to suit each planeswalker's unique vision of Gideon Jura. So, some were big, and some were small, some flat, some round, all of them hard and strong. And, can stones be cheerful? I think mine is. Chandra was sure they'd found the perfect spot, surrounded by nature, alongside a babbling brook, reeds blowing back and forth in the breeze, but in view of the city of Akros, where Gideon had grown up. He had been here once briefly with Gids, not too long ago. It had been night then, too, and he had pointed out the Therosian god heaven of Nyx and all its constellations. It seemed to her now as if constellation Heliod watched them from above, and not without some approval of their efforts. There were no trees nearby, which seemed to offend Nisa. From a pouch of her belt, she pulled out an acorn and buried it about 6 inches deep and a yard behind the cairn. Ajani knelt beside the brook, and with both paws scooped up a little water, which he poured over the buried acorn. Nisa then closed her eyes, whispered a request for permission, and then, in a matter of seconds, raised a mighty oak to mark Gideon Jura's grave. Everyone paused in silence to admire that for more than a few minutes. At last, Ajani said, "Couldn't one of us say something?" Nisa frowned at him and looked at the oak, as if to say, "I've just spoken volumes." Johnny nodded his acknowledgement of her eloquence, but still clearly felt like some actual verbiage was necessary. He looked at Chandra, who shook her head in one quick back and forth movement. Suddenly, she felt overwhelmed. She had no words. Choking up, Jace said, "I'll miss my friend." That simple eulogy took Chandra's breath away. She bit her lower lip hard, enough to taste a little copper tang of blood. Watley then stepped forward, announcing, "I have composed a poem in Gideon Jura's honor." Chandra exchanged looks of semi-horror with Jace and Nisa. Watley barely knew Gids, and she wrote him a poem? But Sahili Rai caught Chandra's eye, and her expression seemed to say, "Give her a chance." Watley began. She called it a poem, but she sang it. And well, at least she could sing. She had talent. It wasn't embarrassing to hear. Her voice was a clear alto, soothing and warm without putting one to sleep. It acted as a gateway, opening Chandra and the others to the moment, to the meaning. Another hero falls, another victory won, and yet we who remain are left torn and undone. The man who we mourn is not the champion they cheer. He's more than just a name. to celebrate each year. He held our hearts in outstretched hands. He battled back our fears. We owe him more than can be shed with tears. Our greatest hero falls, our enemies undone. And yet this triumph's cost was far too hard won. They gained a symbol and salvation from the end. We live with knowing that we sacrificed our friend. He held our hearts in outstretched hands. He battled back our fears. Now all we have to offer is our tears. His strength, his soul, his grace they'll never truly know, but we'll recall the man Ian as his legends grow. To them we'll leave the tales of struggles and of trials, but we'll remember all his bright and handsome smile. How's this possible? We didn't know him. She doesn't know us. Know me. How is she capturing our kids? How is she singing what my heart feels? How is she singing my guilt? He held our hearts in outstretched hands. He battled back our fears. We'll miss him more than we can cry in here. Watley's song touched Chandra deeply. She leaned on Nisa and cried. Honestly, it was a relief she could cry. She was actually happy she could cry. The numbness of the night before was gone, at least for the time being. He held our hearts in outstretched hands. He battled back our fear. We'll miss him more than we can cry in tears. When the song ended, Sahili commented, "That's quite unlike the other, poems you've shown me. I felt Gideon Jura required something different." Chandra breathed in the cold night air, looked toward the horizon and sighed out. Gideon would like this. Even Liliana might like this. Instantly, she caught herself. Sorry, she said, quickly. I didn't mean to bring her up. Not here. Not now. It just slipped out. Jace tried to reassure her. It's all right. I think we're all still a bit conflicted about Liliana. Nisa cleared her throat. She tended to talk as little as possible, and she had never really liked Liliana. But when she actually started to speak, what she said came as a bigger surprise than the fact that she was speaking at all. Gideon would not be conflicted. Gideon would try to save Liliana. Gideon would try to redeem her. Chapter 19. Liliana Vess. The ravens flew away, at least for the time being. How long have I been standing here? How long has she been trying to hold off the Raven Man's advances and his oh-so-sincere offer of assistance? She'd managed to put him off for now, whoever he was, resisted him, and whatever he wanted to use her for. But that didn't mean she knew what she wanted instead, what she wanted out of her life. Or do I simply want out of my life? Which is the correct question. What do I expect out of life? Or what do I demand from death? For years, Liliana had been so focused on freeing herself from the demons and dragon that had held her contract. She had never given any real thought to what she would do after attaining her goal. And I damn sure never gave a moment's contemplation to what attaining my goal might cost. She looked down. She'd been standing in chill water up to her ankles. Her feet were numb. Well, fine. Now they match what passes for my soul. She walked on, continuing rather pointlessly toward the ruins of her family's mansion. My life is a ruin, an empty shell like that mansion. Then the whispers began. Oh, no, please, not them. Not them too. First the Raven Man, now the Onaki spirits that inhabited the chain veil kept in the small pouch tied to her belt. The spirits whispered to her, more insistent now than they had been since she'd first obtained the veil. Since the contract was abrogated, it's freed them somehow. Not simply more insistent, they were now more present in her mind. Vessel, they whispered, for that was what they called her, what they considered her to be, something empty that they sought to fill. And they're not wrong about the empty part. The root, they hissed, has finally come to full flower. Give yourself up to us, they hissed, and still your troubled heart. It's tempting to abdicate all responsibility to the spirits, even if abdication is just a euphemism for a kind of death. For at this moment, the stark truth was that a growing part of Liliana was still more and more willing to, even desperate to die. The near drowning she had all but allowed was just the opening salvo of a war she was losing. A war I had better lose on my own terms, for the sake of the gods' forsaken multiverse. I can't allow myself to be used again. A darkness was building within her and around her, and she was frightened where it might lead. Frightened of what I might do next, as it seems I'm capable of anything now, capable of being a monster equal to Bolus himself. She'd have to hold them off for a bit longer, give herself time to find a way, give herself time to tread that final distance. I can do this. It's better. Better for the multiverse, and better for me. I killed Bolus and Gideon to save myself from being the dragon's slave. I should be willing to kill one last person to save myself from becoming the Onaki or the Raven Man's minion. Silence, she said aloud and meant it. The word and the intent behind it was enough to temporarily hush the voices of the spirits. For an hour? For a minute. If I'm going to end things to save myself from becoming their tool, I'd better do it quick. She knew she was close to home. She could crawl in among the shattered dreams of the place. If she did it there, it would seem like a kind justice. This was where she first caused pain, where she first decimated the people she loved the most. Home. She came over a rise. What in Urza's name? She now had a clear view of the ruins. Only they weren't ruins. She had to literally rub her eyes in disbelief. It couldn't be. It's only been a few months since I was last here. The mansion, the Vess mansion, was still some short distance away, but from where Liliana stood atop the rise, it seemed to have been completely refurbished. In fact, from the look and sound of things, 9 hells. There's a damn party going on inside.